that feeling any longer. We got the fire going. And I have a story I want to tell you tonight, okay? And the story is called The House. And our story starts in a small rural community called Crownin. Now, Crownin is on the outskirts of a city called Philippi in West Virginia. That's a real city. And this community has a bad reputation. Crownin is the landfill capital of West Virginia. Rumpke owns 70% of this community. So what a lot of people say is that nothing but bad smells come out of Crownin. Nothing good comes out of this community. Well, we'll learn that this is not necessarily true because Joe and Marina Davidson have lived their whole lives in Crownin. They're 18 years old. They're a young, vibrant couple. They've been best friends since 6th grade. And Joe's a pretty hard worker. Joe works 6 days a week on one of the Rumpke trucks, and he is not only a hard worker, but he is passionate about photography. Now, Joe and Marina have been pure throughout their whole relationship. They've agreed that let's stay virgins until we're married, proclaiming to all who will listen that the purpose of their relationship is to honor God above all else. Now, many around town, they're kind of tired of Joe and Marina. They're tired of them always proclaiming and talking about their faith, especially when the couple announced that somehow, some way, miraculously, they were pregnant months before their wedding. Even though they said, we've never been intimate, we've never done more than hold hands, somehow, some way they were pregnant. Now, you can imagine what everybody did in Crownin. Did they go and approach them and have a face-to-face conversation? No. They took to Twitter, they went to Facebook, and they condemned Joe and Marina online, saying things like, Joe and Marina, you're hypocrites, you're liars, you're sinners. We can't trust them. They don't love and honor God. They're fakes. They don't live out what they preach. And so throughout the pregnancy, which is almost 9 months in now, only one of Marina's relatives, her cousin Beth, only Beth believed that this was really a miracle from God. But this isn't their only problem. Joe and Marina live in an old, beautiful farmhouse. It's sitting on 70 acres of land. And this home has been passed down for generations, over 100 years, going from one family to the next. And so it was about a year ago where Joe's parents finally said, you know what, Joe? It's time for you to have the house. And they gave him the house and the land as an early wedding gift. Now, the mayor of Crownin has always had his eye on this house. The mayor, known to many as simply Mr. Harold, he's an angry and aggressive businessman who desperately wants the Davidson land to develop a large, sprawling shopping center. And he's told everybody, only this piece of property can be used, could work for my dream project. But Mr. Harold knows that if Joe and Marina ever have a child, then their house is going to be guaranteed to be in their family's possession long after he's gone. And so he refuses to accept this. Here's what Mr. Harold does. He calls a young group of entrepreneurs from California. They're called the Wise Guys. They're land developers. They're real kind of colorful hipsters with a real knack for cutting-edge land development. Now, Mr. Harold wants to use these Wise Guys to figure out what would tempt, what would force the Davidsons to move while coming up with a plan for his future shopping center, which is going to have a vintage t-shirt shop, a boot store, a brewery, even a small plate bistro, just to name a few of those spots. So inevitably, Joe's job at Rumpke calls him. And Joe's job says, hey, listen, we're taking all the employees from Crownin. We're going down to Birmingham, Alabama for retreat, for training. And so Joe and Marina are thrilled. Just to get away for a weekend sounds great because the gossip and the pressure of Crownin had grown to a fever pitch. Now, the drive to Birmingham was pretty uneventful until they were minutes away from the hotel on the outskirts of the city in a very rural district. Now, there's only one state road that goes in and out, and it was down to one lane. So after about 30 minutes of sitting in excruciating traffic, Marina decides to check on their hotel room reservation. And as she does that, she recognizes, wait a minute, Joe, we never reserved a hotel room and the only hotel available for us to stay in. And Joe drops his head into his hands and he says, Marina, I thought you were doing that. Now, Marina held back her frustration. It was hard. She's very uncomfortable. She's very pregnant at this point. But Joe was trying, and she knew that. So she jumped back on her phone. She looked around and said, okay, listen, there is a town 7 miles out, plenty of hotel rooms. We'll go there, but we're going to need more gas. Well, Joe had missed that as well. They were on fumes, but thankfully there was a gas station coming up if the traffic would just ever move. And eventually it did. The cars crept in front of them, and they were able to pull into this gas station, which looked more suited for a haunted house or maybe a museum than anything else. Now, no one else was there at the gas station at that time, only the gas station attendant. He was a teenager taking a smoke break outside, listening to some loud music through his headphones. And Marina smiled as she rushed in to the convenience store to find a restroom. This teenage attendant didn't pay any attention. He just continued to listen to his music under the large pine tree, tapping his foot to the heavy metal beat. And so as Joe began filling up his car, his mind started to wander a little bit. And he started watching a group of stray cats drinking out of a rusty silver bowl by the door heading into the convenience store. But his mind didn't wander far. And the reason why is because all of a sudden he heard this loud scream coming from inside the convenience store. And so Joe left the gas pump behind, began sprinting toward the convenience store. He leaped over the stray cats, who for some reason began following him into the convenience store. Gas station attendant, still clueless, has no idea what's going on. And as Joe ran into the convenience store, he heard another yell. And he recognized, wait a minute, Marina is in the bathroom. And so he barged into the bathroom, and what he saw with the cat still on his heel are two things he could not immediately comprehend. The first thing is that he realized that he had just ran into the most filthy environment of his life. Coming from a garbage man, that says a lot. The second thing was that his wife was giving birth on the floor of this filthy place. Oh no, Joe muttered to himself, reaching for his phone. No bars, no signal, and of course not. This gas station hailed from the 1950s. What did he expect? There was no reception out here. And then it came to him. He was going to have to do something. He was going to have to come up with a plan. And so turning back around, Joe ran out of the restroom. Marina shouted, "Joe, where are you going?" No doubt confused. And as Joe ran back into the store area, the cat stayed behind, as if watching over Marina, and he began frantically looking around the convenience store for a t-shirt. He finally found a rack of t-shirts by the discount DVDs. Only one kind of t-shirt. You probably have seen these before. It said, "I love big trucks and I cannot lie." And so he grabbed that, found a pair of old scissors by the cash register, and then he began running back in to the bathroom. Marina screamed again, "Joe, Joe." And as he barged back into the bathroom, t-shirt and scissors in hand, he grabbed as many hand towels as he could find, praying a quick prayer, trying to convince himself that he was a doctor. And he said, "I can do this," to himself. "I can do this." But his confidence shook again as another one of his wife's screams echoed throughout the entire gas station. Now outside, the road crews, remember the road crew, they were wrapping up for the day. The road crews are bringing in the cones. They're bringing in the signs. They are directing and shepherding the last group of cars. Now, Big Bobby, the team leader, heard the scream from the gas station. He stopped. He says, "Hey, did you guys hear that?" Well, the two other remaining crewmen, desperate to get home, reluctantly nodded. "Yep, we heard that." "Wait, there it is again," Big Bobby said. "It's coming from the gas station." They all three took a moment to look at each other before Big Bobby spoke again. "You guys remember the morning devotional we did today?" See, these three men, they would get together before work, and they'd always do a quick Bible study before starting their day. And Steve, the man to Bobby's right, knew it wasn't a coincidence, and he answered, "Yeah, we talked about the Good Samaritan. We talked about going across the street to help other people in need." And Steve said this with a sigh, resigned that they were going to have to help whether they liked it or not. And so Big Bobby nodded, and he started running toward the screams, obviously coming from the gas station. The two other road workers quickly followed behind, and they rushed into the convenience store, still paying no attention to the clueless gas station attendant, still under the pine tree. And Big Bobby reached the bathroom first, but the screams now have stopped. He swung open the door, and what did he find inside? Joe and Marina on the floor, both covered in the blood of birth and surrounded by a few stray cats. But their smile said it all. The baby was fine. The big truck's t-shirt, the hand towels, those old scissors to cut the umbilical cord had done the job. And so Big Bobby pulled out his phone, ready to dial 911 for help. But he paused for a moment and he asked, "So what's his name?" Joe smiled and said, "Joshua," maybe smiling a little bit wider as he hears the name of his son from his own voice for the first time. But the story doesn't end there. Sometime later, the young hip entrepreneurs, you remember the wise guys, the land developers, they hear about Joshua being born. And so they go to Mr. Harold, the mayor, and Mr. Harold hears about this and says, "Here's what I want you guys to do. I want you to go and learn more about this family. I want to see how can we bully them to give up their land." But in their research, the wise guys learned quite a bit more about the house of Davidson. For generations, this home has been used to house slaves fighting for their freedom. Its historical and its spiritual significance led the Davidson family very early on to make a vow to never, ever part with this house. And these land developers were wise enough to know this is not the kind of vow that you want to mess with. Instead, following their GPS one night, they made their way to the house in Crownan, finding the Davidsons willing to welcome them in. And it was a warm welcome. And so instead of being Mr. Harold's bullies, the wise guys lavished the Davidson family with gifts, and they promised, "We'll go back and we'll lead Mr. Harold astray by giving him bad business advice." In fact, one of the wise guys says this, "Hey, Mr. Harold trusts us. He really does. And so what we'll do is we'll tell him that we found your land unsuitable for his needs. At least for right now, he'll believe us." And so Mr. Harold never built on the land. But you know what? Joshua did. Eventually, the miracle baby became a man, and he added on to the house. He made it so big that it seemed to stretch over all 70 acres. And the house became a children's home. And Joshua invited in all the missing, all the marginalized, and he loved them as his own kids. And to this day, people are unable to count or comprehend just how many he's adopted in as his own sons and his own daughters. And no matter how many Joshua invites in, the house will always, always have enough room. The end. And so what a humble beginning, right? Yeah. You're right, Isaiah? You okay, buddy? Oh, good. What a humble beginning. What started on the floor of a filthy gas station restroom eventually birthed a home for countless sons and daughters. Yet, as you probably could tell listening to this, right? This is the story of Jesus as well. A baby boy born of a teenage virgin in the grime of a dirty cave, made to be a stable. God arrives in the flesh, a humble beginning if there ever was one. There wasn't a procession of trumpets and confetti or anything like that. Just some awestruck shepherds and a group of wealthy and wise Gentiles on the way. And so what started on the floor of a filthy stable became the cornerstone of God's eternal home and family. Yet this story wasn't told first in Jesus' time. Actually, God spoke about this much earlier in the time of King David. You guys remember we've been looking at the story of King David the last 6 weeks. And David is doing very well at this point as king of Israel. And what he wants to do is he wants to thank God for everything he's done for him. "Thank you, Lord, for taking me from a shepherd all the way to a king." And so David calls in Nathan the prophet, his spiritual guide. And he says, "Nathan, I want to build God a house. I want to build him a home bigger than our palace, bigger than this palace I'm living in, to let him know how much I love him." But Nathan comes back and says, whoa, David, hold on to that building permit. God's got a better idea. Instead of you building for him, here's what he wants. And we read about this in 2 Samuel chapter 7. And if my friend Kristen can make it up here, I think she can. She's going to read to us this passage from 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 11 to 16. And this is Nathan communicating back to David what the Lord has said.
"The Lord declares to you that the Lord himself will establish a house for you. When your days are over and you rest with your ancestors, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, your own flesh and blood, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he will be my son. When he does wrong, I will punish him with a rod wielded by men, with floggings inflicted by human hands. But my love will never be taken away from him, as I took it away from Saul, whom I removed from before you. Your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever.
And so what God is saying through Nathan to David is, David, I don't want you to build a house for me. I want to build a house for you, a house that stretches from your imperfect kin all the way to my perfect king. And this will not be a house of brick and mortar, but it will be a spiritual home, an everlasting, unending kingdom ruled by an eternal king. And those are the three important words for tonight: everlasting, unending, and eternal. What God is saying is, David, we're going to need a bigger house. You can't build a house big enough for what I'm talking about, where everyone can be invited in. And so here's what I want to close with tonight. Here's a question for each and every one of us. Have you been searching for a home like this? Because if you have, maybe tonight is your humble beginning. Maybe tonight you call off the search party. You lay down the hammer and the nails, and we allow God to be the builder. We allow God to be the provider of our true home. Because here's the thing, there's always a room for you in His house, even when it feels like there's not room for us in our own home. The birth of Jesus was the cornerstone of God's house. It was the ignition of God going after our own hearts. And so if you would, let's stand right now as we celebrate the coming of our King. Our King who was born to build the everlasting, never-ending, eternal home.
The herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Peace on earth and mercy mild, God and sinners reconciled. Joyful all nations rise, join the triumph of the skies. With the angelic hosts proclaim, Christ is born in Bethlehem. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Christ by highest heaven adored, Christ the everlasting Lord. Late in time, behold Him come, offspring of the Virgin's womb. Veiled in flesh, the Godhead singing, Hail the incarnate deity. Pleased as man with men to dwell, Jesus our Emmanuel. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Mild He lays His glory by, born that man no more may die, born to raise the sons of earth, born to give them second birth, risen with healing in His wings, light and life to all He brings. Hail the Son of righteousness, hail the heaven-born Prince of Peace. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare Him room. nature sing, and heaven and nature sing. Joy to the world, the Savior reigns. Let men their songs employ, while fields and floods, rocks, hills, and plains repeat their sounding joy, repeat their sounding joy, repeat their sounding joy. He rules the world with truth and grace, and makes the nations prove the glories of his righteousness, and wonders of his love, and wonders of his love, and wonders of his love. Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare him room, and heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing.
Before we close in prayer, I just want to read a quick passage to you guys. You guys may be familiar with it. Isaiah 9:6, for unto us a child is born, a son is given, and on his shoulders rests the government, and he will be called Everlasting Father, Mighty Counselor, Mighty God, Wonderful Counselor, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Sorry, I messed that up. But you guys get